So I want to speak to you from the perspective of education. The National Education Union represents 500,000 education workers in England, Northern Ireland and Wales. We represent not just teachers but support staff as well, and support staff would include teaching assistants, it would include IT support workers, it would include caretakers and catering staff. So we have a really broad spectrum, and I hope that when any of us who are representing the NEU speak, we speak on behalf of the education movement. So I'd like to focus specifically on education today as much as possible, if that's okay. I mean, the cost of war is incalculable in terms of human life, but I want to speak to you specifically from an education perspective because the cost of war also impacts on our wider public services here at home, which has a direct impact on our lives and on our society, which is a point that I want to return to shortly. But first, I've been provided with some stats for you. So school budgets are being cut. Teachers and support staff salaries are falling further behind those of other professionals. The government claims that there is no money for education, and yet it can always find money for war. In 2010, the UK spent 5.6% of national income on education and 2.4% on defence. Today, spending on education has fallen to just 3.9%. Sorry. Whereas defence expenditure remains where it was before austerity. Sorry, that's 3.9%. I always stumble over that because it's less than what the Tories have put in. So today, spending on education has fallen to just 3.9%, whereas defence expenditure remains where it was before austerity. But the government has made a commitment to increase defence spending to 2.5% of national income, rising to 3.5% in 10 years' time. Meanwhile, the very same government steadfastly refused to make any such commitment to our children's future. And it goes deeper than that as well, doesn't it? So what about international aid? The government made no secret of the fact that it has funded an increase in defence spending by cutting the aid budget from 0.5% of gross national income to 0.3% by 2027. That is its lowest level for 30 years. This is a staggering betrayal of the world's most vulnerable people and entirely counterproductive to efforts to build a safer and more secure world. What's more, the government has made clear that education and gender projects will be hardest hit by those aid cuts. With over 270 million children out of school and a global shortage of 44 million teachers, the 2030 target date for attaining the Sustainable Development Goals could not be more challenging. Save the Children have said that the UK's aid cut will result in 2.2 million additional children losing out on schooling. And add to that the cut in aid budgets by the USA, by Norway and by many of the world's major donor countries, and what we have is a perfect storm. Cutting UK aid to tackle global diseases, reduce the impact of climate change and support education in conflict zones will cost lives and drive instability and inequality everywhere. Education is the most powerful tool we have to end poverty, but without urgent action, the world's most vulnerable children will be left behind permanently. With record numbers of people in need of humanitarian assistance, international solidarity has never been more important. And now, more than ever, is not the time to balance the books on the backs of the world's poorest people. I said I wanted to go back to some specifics about education in this country and the impact on society. I've just made a few notes because when I start being off script, I'll get cross about the state of things and I'll become more Geordie the more angry I get, and you might start to lose me. So, if you go back to 2010 and the coalition government coming in, I was a young teacher. I'd only been teaching for a few years, and I was in Gateshead with Alex. Alex Snowden was with me over there at the time. I was teaching in a school called Heworth Grange in Felling. And Felling, those of you who know it, is not the most salubrious area. It is in fact an area which has been incredibly hard hit by generations of imposed austerity. We are looking at 3 generations of enforced unemployment. The closure of huge industries such as shipbuilding still loom large in the community that I served as a teacher. And it is deeply felt in that community still. But what we had when I started working there in 2009 was a committed government, not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but I'd moved from Northumberland to this school in Gateshead, and I was excited to do so because the focus on the arts in that school was really strong. As an art teacher, I was really excited about that. The funding for it to be a specialist arts provision school was there. We could ask for more if we wanted it. There were community hubs. There was real commitment to building a sense of community and to educating those children. They knew what background those children were from. They knew the hardships that they faced. They knew the hardships that their families faced, and they made significant moves to address it, financially backed moves to address it. 2010, the election of the coalition government brought with it Michael Gove and Nick Gibb, the school's minister. So Michael Gove was the education secretary, Nick Gibb was his minister, and they brought with them an ideology which they claimed was to improve the standards of all, especially those in the working class. What that meant in practice was taking away every available support system out of our schools. And while doing that, they imposed accountability measures on our schools. And the school that I worked in was one of many in a working class community that was incredibly hard hit by that. So you impose impossible to achieve accountability measures like Progress 8, like the e-baccalaureate, all of these things that came in during that government. And what happens is children that were fulfilled, children that had meaning in their lives, children who weren't being forced to sit exams that they didn't see any value in, they had opportunities to do other things. There was vocational learning. There was support for them to be active members of a community, and they felt part of a community. Gove and Gibb, starting with the coalition government and then really tackled at pace when it became Tory-led, well, when it became solely Tory, took all of that out of our schools. They stripped every support measure out of our schools in every working class community in this country. What happened in that school was almost every experienced member of staff left, either forced out by the newly imposed Academy Trust, because that was the other gift that the Tories gave us. The Academy Trust move was ramped up so rapidly that we couldn't oppose it. So the mass sell-off of our schools to private interest, still funded by your money, but private interest. So you've got CEOs on £500,000. That's taxpayer money, that's our money, taken out of the system, directly taken out of our schools and given to people who want to turn a profit on the lack of education. I can't call it education of children because I've been in the system and I've seen it. It's not education. It's not. It's teaching to the test. It's the erosion of critical thinking skills. It's the complete lack of any questioning. Any time in the school day devoted to actually having a conversation with children is gone. And so when somebody like Elon Musk takes over one of the world's biggest social media platforms, how do you fight against it? When somebody like Nigel Farage tells people that he's the voice of the working class, how do you fight against it? When you've got a total lack of critical thinking skills in society, and I'm talking about 3 generations of secondary school students now, 3 generations of secondary school, and it was my colleagues in higher education who first started to flag this up. They said our undergraduate students can't read. They don't want to go to the library. They just want the answers given to them. I said, oh God, yeah, that's our fault, sorry. we've been told to just give them the answers so they can pass the test, that we don't get turned into an academy, so that our head teacher doesn't get sacked, so that we don't all lose our jobs. Because that's what they have created, and they've done it on purpose. And the outcome of it is what we see on our streets every day. So what you've seen this week in Belfast, that's the outcome of this ideology. What you've seen in Southampton recently, that's the outcome of this ideology. The number of people willing to vote for reform, that's the outcome of the imposed restrictions on education in our country. And if, as a government, you care at all about the future of your nation, then you educate them. You educate them, because without education there is nothing else. And no wonder we turn to ideologues. No wonder we turn to the far right, to people who supposedly have all the answers, to people who say, well, if you only reject this idea, I've got all the answers for you. Because we have actively and purposely de-skilled our nation. I told you I would go round Satan. I'll try and bring it back. You've seen things like the Alan Milburn report recently. And Bridget Phillipson has really stuck her colours to the mast on that one. It's all about white working class children. It's all about those children not in education or employment or training. But there's no consideration of why they're not in education, why they're not in employment or training. Why are they so unhappy in our schools? That's not for consideration, and instead her answer is to impose another standardised reading test in year 8. The narrowing of the curriculum has wider implications than can be measured in headline figures in school outcomes. The implications are those that we see in our streets. The implications are those where we turn to hateful ideas. And the answer is not bringing BAE systems into your school as a recruitment drive. It's not piling more money into defence because you've managed to whip up enough fear in your country that everybody now believes it's a good idea to fund drones that kill children overseas. It is not a good idea. We all know that. We all see it. We see the inhumanity of it. And anybody who will engage with the ideas critically will question them. But we have had successive governments now who have limited our nation's capacity to ask those questions. And so when Nigel Farage and Reform, very likely the next national government, when Nigel Farage declares war on the National Education Union, his words, not mine, please stand with us. Stand with the trade union movement, stand with the working class, demand better, because we know we can do better. We know we can, but we need to speak with one voice and we need to demand it, because the Labour government are going to be gone soon. And if I was them, and if any of you were in government, you would be nailing down every single thing you possibly could to make it as hard as possible for an incoming far-right government to unravel everything that they haven't yet managed to destroy. I'm going to stop.
Thanks, Sarah. I do like a good rant, although it wasn't entirely a rant, so thank you for that. I got my NU.
Yay!